Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the global economy no longer runs on the US dollar, but on the Chinese yuan. Stock markets in New York play second fiddle to Shanghai and Shenzhen. Global financial decisions no longer revolve around Washington, but are dictated by Beijing. This is the world where China is the undisputed financial superpower, and it's not as far-fetched as it might seem. For decades, the US dollar has served as the world's reserve currency, powering international trade, oil deals, debt, and investment. But if China were to replace the US in that role, the shift would be seismic. First, global reserves would rebalance. Central banks around the world would begin hoarding yuan instead of dollars. Oil-exporting nations like Saudi Arabia might start selling crude in Chinese currency, ending decades of dollar dominance in energy markets. That move alone would have profound ripple effects. US influence over international institutions, like the IMF and World Bank, would weaken. China's own institutions, like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, could grow in importance, offering loans with fewer political conditions. Economically struggling nations might turn to China instead of the West for bailouts, loans, and trade. Trade routes would change. More countries would negotiate in yuan. Foreign businesses would be pressured to follow Chinese financial rules, standards, and even political expectations. If you want access to China's vast consumer market, you follow their game plan, no questions asked. Domestically, the US would feel the pinch. Its ability to print money cheaply to fund debt would decline. Interest rates would rise. Imports would cost more. Inflation could spike. The American lifestyle, long supported by the dollar's global supremacy, would face serious strain. Meanwhile, China's economic clout would grant it unprecedented geopolitical power. Sanctions, which have been a key US foreign policy tool, would become less effective if China can offer alternative systems. Countries under Western pressure could simply pivot to Beijing's financial orbit. Allies of the US might feel torn. Do they remain tied to a declining dollar-based system, or align themselves with China's rising yuan? And then there's the digital realm. With China's central bank, digital currency already in advanced development, financial transactions could be faster, more traceable, and entirely controlled by the state. Imagine a world where privacy and spending disappears, and China sets the global norm for how digital currencies operate. Surveillance capitalism might become surveillance authoritarianism, exported, refined, and embedded into financial systems globally. But this transformation wouldn't happen without challenges. Trust plays a massive role in global finance. The dollar isn't just dominant because of America's wealth. It's because people trust the system behind it. Open institutions, rule of law, market transparency. China's system lacks that same level of openness. The state can freeze assets, intervene in markets, or punish companies that displease its leadership. Would international investors truly shift trillions into a system with less legal protection and more political risk? Perhaps the bigger question is, how would average people experience this new world? If you're living in a developing country, you might find Chinese-funded infrastructure popping up more frequently. Roads, ports, telecom networks, all tied to Chinese banks and Chinese contracts. If you're in Europe, you might notice more Chinese companies buying up local businesses or real estate, using their stronger financial position to expand influence. If you're in the US, your cost of living might rise, wages could stagnate, and retirement savings might shrink in real value. And culturally, financial power brings soft power. Hollywood once shaped global narratives, but now Chinese cinema, media, and tech platforms might set the tone. Educational institutions, think tanks, even news outlets could align with Beijing's worldview, not through conquest, but through investment and dependency. This world wouldn't necessarily be dystopian, but it would be unfamiliar. It would be a world where economic leverage, not military force, defines superpower status. A world where Beijing hosts the G8, where Chinese firms dictate global supply chains, and where political alignment is bought with currency, not bullets. In this future, China wouldn't just be the factory of the world, it would be the bank. the broker, the regulator, and the judge. The question isn't whether China wants that power. It's whether the rest of the world is ready to live in the financial system it would create. Because once that shift happens, there may be no going back.